so much of the taxes that have been put on have gone to social programs. Meanwhile, what's not happened is that we've built all these condos everywhere and we don't have big enough sewer pipes. There's not enough infrastructure underneath. Basically, this is what a left-wing government does. They do all their social programs and they leave the city to decay.
Hi, I'm Scott Hennig, President and CEO of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome to Q&A. Today my guest is Chip Wilson. Chip, you'll know him as the founder of Lululemon, but he's also an entrepreneur, philanthropist, athlete, he's an author, and he's also politically engaged, which I think is most interesting for our audience. So thanks for doing this, Chip.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. Love it.
That's great. So for people who haven't read your excellent book, why don't you start, just give people, we're going to talk about the politics stuff coming up, but why don't you start giving an idea of how you got into the athletic wear industry?
Well, my mom was a sewer and my dad was a phys ed teacher, and I'm 6'3", so back, when I was like, in 60, 9, 70 type of thing, I was a head taller than everybody. And so I was a big guy, and clothing didn't fit, especially athletic clothing. At the time, seams would kind of be in between legs, so you'd have rashing. Really, I had a bubble butt, so nothing fit, and everything was too tight, and I couldn't move. So I just started solving that, and just started making clothing for myself. And I started in the triathlon early. I was in the third Ironman in Kona.
Wow.
And I was easily 50 pounds heavier than everybody. So I started making a triathlon clothing, which is a complete failure because there was maybe 500 people in the world doing it at the time. And of course, I couldn't figure out economy of scale production. And so that was a failure. But when I started moving into the surf, skate, snowboarding industry, that's when things broke even for me. I learned a lot. I call it my 18-year MBA, but I certainly didn't make any money, but it sure gave me the foundation to do something wonderful in my next venture.
So West Beach, your first company, you sold that and then founded Lululemon, which I'm sure was exciting at the early days. What were some of those early days like at building Lululemon?
Well, I was really determined to have the quality and word of mouth run the company. I didn't really have any money for marketing. After I bought the fabric, I bought these 3 sewing machines from Japan that were like brand new, which kind of took that seam out of the middle and flattened everything out, which was a major innovation. We hired a couple people in order to kind of get things through, and of course, it was all about women, so I had to get women designers and get feedback and all those things that kind of went with it. It was massively exciting. But like everything, when you open a business, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I'm sure it was the same for Microsoft. The first 2 months are crickets, and you got to wait till people kind of find out about it. We had a second floor store because I couldn't afford a main floor store. So it was like trying to get people in through a back alley, which was impossible. And then figuring out this whole community thing, which nobody had done before. So in order to kind of get people into my store, I had yoga classes there in the morning and at night, and they found out about the clothing, and that was the start of that whole thing. But went to the limit on to the where I couldn't meet payroll 3 or 4 times in the first I'd say 2.5 years.
Wow.
So that's really exciting. Especially when you have 2 kids and alimony, and I bet the farm, and it really only worked because I had a brand new business model, and that business model was vertical retailing. A lot of people know it now because you can go direct to consumer with e-commerce. Well, back then it was like getting rid of the wholesalers, so that was the thing. So, I had to prove that model out, but when you go wholesale, you can reach like 1,000 people, you can sell 20 to each of them, you can get economy of scale production, but when you're opening one store, then no, you don't have, at the beginning, you don't have enough people coming through. So that's why nobody had ever done vertical retailing before. And I was just determined that this was the way it was going to work, and I had to supply a better quality product at a better price than Nike and Adidas if I was going to like overtake them. Which Lululemon's overtaken Adidas now, and I don't think it'll overtake Nike, not in my plans, because I don't think it has the infrastructure or the governance to do that anymore.
Oh, fair enough. One other bet you made was on professional development of your staff, and having read the book, I was really struck with how much you focused on that.
Yeah.
So what was the, sort of became known as the Lululemon training program, and what was in that? What was sort of the backbone to your training program for your staff?
The backbone of it, well, let's just go back a bit. When I sold West Beach to a place in Salem, Oregon, I traveled 6 hours there and back on the weekends because my kids were here. And I just started, it was the advent of audio tapes. So I started listening to every business and self-help one there was. And really out of those 100 that I listened to, 3 books came to the top right off the bat, and they were 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The Psychology of Achievement, and what I think is the greatest business book ever, Good to Great. So then I combined that with something that I thought was phenomenal about creativity, and that's the Landmark Forum. So basically, if you look at how most people move through life, they incrementally get better because they're really comparing whatever they're doing now to the past, which is why we get 7% incremental growth. But companies that really break out, or people that really break out, are creating their present from an unknown future, like they have amnesia. So to get great creative people in the business, to have people think about not being constrained by the experiences of their past, what their friends and family think and society thinks they should do, which most people are so constrained of. The Landmark Forum allowed people to kind of like break out of that and have free choices to actually the future that would otherwise not have occurred.
You use in the book, I think, the example of trying to set the goal of weight loss and then think about that. Can you give that example?
Sure. So I use it because it's a simple one for people. And so for me, I spent a lot of time, I was 242 pounds. I knew I had all the baby fat on me from too many kids and not moving around enough, and went, like I really I want to be 220 pounds. But that 220 pounds is really based on being 242 pounds and just wanting to be 220. But if I'd woken up in the hospital with amnesia from a car crash, and I went, oh my God, like I look terrible. What do I want to like get this fixed up. Well, I might do some research, and I go, well, the guy who's this age, 6'3", should be 208 pounds. And then I would have gone, okay, so I could then set my future from like something unconstrained from my experience of the past, maybe do research, or maybe just come up with a number out of nothing, and maybe I'll fail or not. But I find most people are, they set goals for themselves, but they don't, these goals are so constrained from the experiences of their past that people don't really break out to live a great life. And our lives are really set up to our first 2 instincts, survival and reproduction. And that's all it's all nature cares about. It doesn't care about the human being having a great life. So to break out of that, you really have to think about, through amnesia, to think about, what am I going to do that is totally wild? And laying on my deathbed, did I live the life I really wanted to live? What's that line that goes, live today like your life depends on it?
You now own a big chunk of the largest athletic company in China. What's the biggest difference between the retail athletic business in North America versus China?
Well, I should probably quantify that. I own maybe 1% of Anta, which is the Nike of China, but together we own this suite of athletic global brands, of which I own 20%, and then Tencent owns 10, private equity owns 20, and Anta, which is the company that's really my partner, owns 51% and control the board. So I would say the number one thing is people really revere heads of companies, founders that bring a vision and can move things quicker then what I'd say is the governance structure in North America of committee. Everything's run by committee, but everything's kind of safe. So I think what you see happening in North America is you get like incremental movement forward. If you were sitting in 1990, to do a deal, internationally would take about 4 months. Now you can do like 5 a day. It's just
Right.
the way, and people really haven't got the context of how fast the world is changing and moving. And I would say that the governance structure in North America and the political structure, especially in the U.S. with the judicial, Congress, and presidential, does not move fast enough now to maintain how fast, to change for how fast the world is changing. That in China they can make things happen quickly. In North America we can't. And ultimately, you can see what has happened in Europe. I wouldn't invest a penny in Europe, and I wouldn't have done it for the last 20 years if I could get away with it, because the rules and regulations and taxes. It's impossible for somebody to be an entrepreneur and set up a new business now. It's virtually impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see North America heading in that direction, and China is not there, and they're really the bastions for free enterprise, as long as you don't contradict the government in any way. And if you want to contradict the government, then you have to work yourself into the Communist Party, be an influence there, but there's a one voice at the top.
So what are you seeing with public boards these days, for public companies at least? How are they reacting to free speech and pressure from the public?
Well, the thing I'd have to go on in the last year is this whole ESG thing. Again, I look back in 2002, 2003 when corporate social responsibility came through. And I think it's some kind of form of the left, trying to say, like all corporate companies are bad and, they need controlling. And, I think it's like anything, a cross-section of the population, you're always going to get bad people. But you can't like target those bad people and say like all people are bad. So you kind of live with these bad people. You go, well, that's in fact what we do. And we have laws and rules and regulations around it. I'd say in corporations are no different. I think there's the bad ones. And of course, news is not about good things. It's always about the bad things. So it allows these, the corporate social responsibility people to kind of, in the early 2000s, to kind of say like, all corporations are bad and they should be doing this, they should be doing that. Not recognizing, I think especially for a company like Lululemon, like I ignored it all because we were putting so much money into people development and raising people from mediocrity to greatness and having them be responsible and not complain and know what integrity was and be able to make a right decision. But like in any company, you're going to have like over a period of time with that many people, some people are going to make bad decisions. Does it make the company bad? No, just you make bad decisions. Everyone does. So I think this is where the left gets to jump on, especially with social media. All of a sudden, one thing goes wrong, and which would normally go wrong back in the 80s and no one would know about it, the company would fix it and move forward. But that doesn't exist anymore. So now you have this whole ESG thing coming on, which to me is just another form of the corporate social responsibility. They've just retagged it, hoping they could kind of get it through.
Right.
But I see, like companies jumped on it, and because you have ESG investing, it's bad news, and again, boards are bad news adverse. So rather than kind of say, putting it up there, like, what is our vision? What are our values? This is what we're driving for, and no, we don't have to do it what you say what you're saying, because ultimately in CSR and ESG, nobody knows the metrics. So it doesn't matter what you do, you'll be wrong to those people, like especially the warriors.
Right.
So yeah, 100%, you can never win against them. So I think what you end up with is, I think you end up in a lot of things where companies they're very, very good at doing lip service to it, setting it up. They got their committee, they got their ESG person, they've got this they've got their diversity person, they've got, and it's just an expense that goes right back to people. And as far as what boards are doing, I think they're still scared, but I think they're smart. And I think, behind the scenes, they get to really talk about it, and they don't. I think the goal is now not to get pigeoned into any metric where somebody can come back to you, but say, like, this is what we're doing. We believe in all these things. We're changing it, and we actually work with factories that don't have any of this, but we go into factories to try to change them and try to give them this, and this, but because we're making a quality product, this is what we feel we need. Something like that.
Right. Well, thinking about governments, what do you think is the biggest barrier governments put in place for Canadian companies to grow and succeed?
What the Canadian government?
Yeah. What are governments in Canada doing to keep companies from growing? What's the biggest barrier they're putting up that keeps companies from growing and exceeding?
Well, I'd just say that the government just puts in too much risk into the building. You can see us, as I was saying, moving slowly to a European point of view, where you get the Liberals or the NDP coming in, and none of them have been business people, none of them have run a business, none of them employed anybody. They've had something done wrong to them sometime in their life, which is why they've gone into politics. And so because they don't understand how anything works, it's easy for them to pass laws fixing what it is that they see as an injustice. So I'll give an example. I mean, down in California, you can't have a manager on hourly salary. If they're on salary, then you can only have them work like 20% of the time on a retail floor, because they didn't want their managers to be overworked so that they got less than minimum wage for being on a salary. So what do you do then? Then you don't have you have small stores, you have a manager, and it's uneconomical because you can't have them work on the floor. More so because they're not working on the floor, they're not interacting with the customer, they're not interacting with the product, they don't understand what's going on. So no great managers come out of New York or California, the communist, they're communist countries inside the USA. So where do all your great managers come? They come from, again, surprise, surprise, Texas and Florida, and right-wing states that kind of allow free enterprise to work and allow people and individuals to be all they can be.
We're here in Vancouver, high property values, high property taxes. You had a new mayor elected here this past fall. Since then, have you seen any improvements, anything positive since the election of the new mayor?
Well, Ken Sims is our new mayor. Laz, we are so lucky to have somebody that's actually started and run a few businesses and understands all the heartaches of it. So I know Ken is, when he started Rosemary Rock Salt with his wife Tina, they, the permitting to open a store, they were small and young, and yet it was taking 8, 9, 10 months to open a store. And they're paying the rent on it while they're doing it. I think Ken saw that he had 4 young boys, and he wanted his boys to be able to live in Vancouver. So I think he knows that housing prices are, for the middle class, there has to be something there. We've got this wealthy kind of West End, and we've got kind of the low, BC provincial government seems to be taking care of that, but not doing, of course, when governments get involved, they do a terrible job, I think. But I think you're going to see a lot of action, and you have to spend your first 100 days getting your ducks in a row. Well, now his first 100 days has come. You've seen they've kind of put through most everything they said they were going to do on their election. I think I think that you're going to see as much happen as they can happen. I also know that so much of the taxes that have been put on Vancouverites, for instance, have gone to social programs. Meanwhile, what's not happened is that we've built all these condos everywhere, and we don't have big enough sewer pipes. There's not enough infrastructure underneath. So basically, this is what a left-wing government does. They do all their social programs, and they leave the city to decay. And then when you get a responsible government in, then it doesn't seem like they do very much, because they have to do everything that's hidden that wasn't being done for so long.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, we're here in Gastown. We're a couple blocks away, either way here from East Hastings, where we've got countrywide knowledge of homelessness, drug use, violence.
Yeah.
What's the solution to that, if there is one?
Well, I think today actually the legalized drug came in, where you could have under a couple ounces of something, and not that I think that may be the right thing to do, but I think what it does is it doesn't allow police who are finding somebody in a really bad situation who needs help to kind of arrest them and get them off the street. I think that was an excuse the police had, and I think it's really going to backfire. And I think people are never satiated. I mean, this is the human condition. Once now I have free drugs and I've got that 2 ounces, then why should I stop stealing bikes all the same? I'm pretty good at it. Or breaking into homes, I'm pretty good at it. I want more, you know? So I don't think that will end. As much as I can understand, and from the little reading I've done, but what really seems to work is I like kind of these, like in Germany, like work farms, for instance, that'll maybe be in the middle of the country, and they're really set up to have people work every day to get them out of the environment of drugs, to have mental facilities there to kind of bring people through a process and then release them back. This thing of what's happening in Gastown, where you just have 5,000 charities continuing to feed everybody and support everybody, is a self-fulfilling fallacy to that for success. It hasn't worked. It's not working. I think we have to split it up. I think we definitely, and I think the government, the BC NDP now is doing it. I think they're resetting a psychology facility to help grab these people and move them in. And of course, it's all the constitutional stuff. Can you move a person into a facility without their approval, and do they even have the facility to approve it for themselves?
Right.
Which is why I think having the free drugs is not necessarily going to work for us.
No, fair enough. Changing topics a little bit, you're an avid reader.
Yeah.
Famously, when you were working on the Alaska pipeline in your 20s, you set out to read the 100 greatest books of all time.
Right.
One of them that you cite in your book as having an influence over you was Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
Correct.
What influenced a 20-year-old Chip about that book? What was it that really resonated with you, and what still resonates with you today?
Well, I probably don't even know when I was 18 and read it how much of an effect it would have on me. I read it and I went, oh, that's one of the greatest books I ever read, but I didn't have any kind of foundation to put the information in the book on. I was young. But when I turned 52, I read it again. I went, oh my God, either I was genetically built this way or my experiences have led me to this, but I could get where everything inside of me was built on that book. And it was a book of, building and inventing a great product and getting out to the marketplace and such a good product that everyone would appreciate it. And of course, you can't deliver a great product without being a phenomenal leader of people, without developing people, without having people in your company that get as much out of it as you do. And so it was a template. I could see now, looking back at it at the age of 52, it was a template for how I was going to run my businesses. It also gave me the window into that once you're successful, people will want to take your money away from you. Because if people can vote themselves money, as was seen with the Liberal Party in Canada, then lazy people will do that. Why should I work for it if I can get Trudeau to, get his printing press out of his bed and print some more money and give it to me? Why shouldn't I have the same amount of money and as that Chip Wilson guy who worked 18 hours a day on the oil pipeline for 2 years without, and traded his life in for money. Why shouldn't I have as much money as that Chip Wilson guy that worked 18 hours a day for 25 years making no money, and now he's got money? Well, I want some of that, Oh, well, I don't really have to work like that. I mean, I can just vote for Trudeau and get the money. I mean, it's simple. But, the minute that there's more, I think it was Romney said this, the minute that there's more people voting who are dependent on government money than aren't, is the decline of a civilization, which I think is very clear what we've seen in Europe.
No, I think you're right. I think you're definitely right. But how do you describe yourself politically, philosophically? Can you put a label on what you are?
Yeah, I say that I'm right of Attila the Hun economically and a little left of Greenpeace environmentally.
Okay,
yeah,
that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah.
You famously said socialism will always fail when you had some protesters show up to your house, unfortunately. Socialism seems to come in waves. Where do you think we are right now in the current cycle with socialism?
Well, I think, having Ken Sims being elected on the civic platform is a ray of hope. I mean, it does seem to go in cycles. We had the Liberal Party here in BC for a long time, which was phenomenal, with the Conservative Party in Canada. I mean, this country was producing, and BC was the #1 place to do business in Canada, if not North America. Even the way our corporate taxes and everything, it made more sense to be Lululemon in Vancouver than it did in the United States. I would say it seems to me it's running in 16-year cycles now, and we're running towards the end of it. I think that it seems interesting that I think everyone was surprised when Ken Sims won by a landslide. And it surprised me because I really think voters aren't that smart. But, it seems to be that every so often the left just goes too far left, and people are going, this isn't good. There's something wrong. But I think for the people that are not educated in economics or balance sheets or accounting, they need some real bad news for 4 or 5 years before they can change their vote. I feel, Ken's the first part of it. But the NDP and BC are smart. I mean, I think they saw what happened with Kennedy Stewart here in the civic election. You could see the minute that Ken got elected, suddenly, the east side was important of Vancouver. Suddenly, police was important. Suddenly, psychological, wards were important, and housing was important. Which, I think they got it, and I think the NDP and BC are doing whatever they can to shore up the weak sides. But I mean, it's depressing when you kind of see a picture in the paper of our NDP leader Trudeau and our EB kind of holding hands. It's like, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
You supported free market candidates in elections. You support free market advocacy groups. A lot of people in your position would just keep their head down, not pop up. Why have you decided to do that, and why do you think it's important for people in your position to speak out and have a voice?
Well, I think it is. There are a bunch of scared people, and I think that the thing around Musk probably, and I think Peter Thiel, there becomes a point in life where I don't need any more money. I'm 67 years old now. I really want a great life for everybody in BC and Canada. And yes, it could hurt my short-term economic outlook, but in the end of the day, if I'm out to take care of my great-great-grandchildren that aren't even born yet, and the only way to take care of them is to take care of everybody, then I have a responsibility to not complain and to do something about it. So, and I think that's the definition of being responsible. If I find myself complaining twice, then either I better shut up or I got to do something about it. So that's where I come from.
Well, good for you, and I think we're all glad you made that choice. Personally, for you, you've got muscular dystrophy. You've invested a lot of your own resources into trying to find a cure. Two-part question for you. What's it like living with muscular dystrophy? And two, do you think a cure is something that is realistically and you'll find here in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to have a cure by December 31st, 2027, very goal-orientated, and all decisions I make, kind of go into that. So there may be something with more of a risk to it that costs more money, but if the goal is to get it done by 2027, then yes. I think biomed, I mean, not really because of COVID, but I think just something occurred where it's moving at an exponential rate, just like technology is. I think the moving AI into this type of into biomed is helping immensely. So one, yes, I think it is going to get solved by that time. And there's another possibility. If it doesn't get solved by that time, the possible ability to grow muscle faster than it's being eaten up by the body may also occur. I know the U.S. military is doing a lot of work on regenerating muscle from people that have had muscle blown off in battle. And I know that if you really think about it, most people only die after they fall, and they fall mostly because they're lacking muscle. And if the cure can happen to regenerate muscle, then almost immediately the lifespan of human beings expands 15 years. So you can imagine what a drug like that would do. And I've kind of got access to most everything, and I would say that definitely is coming in the next 5 years.
And what's the biggest impact it's had on your life, living with the disease?
Well, I'm one of the lucky ones because, people end up in wheelchairs at the age of 10, and I have now made it to 67, and I can't do a push-up if I fall. I have no triceps, and this beautiful face I have is going to get messed up, but sure, no one will be sad about that except for me. But as of about 2 weeks ago, one of my favorite things was to do the grouse grind. I've now said I can't do the grouse grind anymore. I had to stop playing squash because I can't lift my hands over my head, but I can play tennis and kind of go side to side. So, it's I think that without a cure, by probably 2030, I could possibly be in a wheelchair or some kind of assisted walking or something like that.
Wow. Well, I wish you luck, and I hope the research goes well and you hit your target. So.
Yeah, I'm a super positive guy, so
Well, and you've convinced me that it can happen, so I think that's really great.
Great.
You've talked about treating aging like a disease and expanding life expectancy. What in our lifetime? What do you think we're going to see in terms of growth of life expectancy?
Well, right now I'm working with Peter Diamandis that's done a lot of he has a business about the X Prizes. So he's got one with Musk, the $100 million carbon capture, he put people in space, et cetera, like that. We're working together, and we're putting in, I think, $30 to $40 million inside this $101 million age reversal prize. So it has to, we'll probably announce it later, in the middle of the year. We're waiting for some dots to be, I's to be dotted, et cetera. But 3 organs will have to have shown 20 years of age reversal with 1 year of treatment. So, and then that prize will be given out in 7 years, assuming it happens. And I tacked on another $10 to $15 million bonus if they could solve, FSHD, because one of the organs they have to prove on is muscles. So, so longevity, I think anyone born probably under the age of 20 today is almost guaranteed to live to 120. With all the medicine and science and everything I see, I mean, this is, if you really think about it, why should I die with any money? Like if I can put all my money into living younger or living longer, and it's got to be quality. It just can't be like a brain kind of sitting on a jar on a shelf. So that's a lot to do with it. But I can't imagine a better place to put my money. And as I say that, we're very committed to buying, this Canada having 30% of parkland set aside by 2030. So it's another $100 million investment we have. We have $100 million investment in solving muscular dystrophy. You know, we're kind of, it's time in my life to like starting making things happen, you know, so I do.
So talking about people living to be 120 and maybe beyond that, what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on governments when it comes to things like healthcare spending and pension benefits? Like how do you see that causing some changes that we're going to have to make?
Yeah, I mean, I took the economics of the healthcare system in university, you know, 5 million years ago, and I've always had this thought that what goes missing, because the context is that people are getting older, governments don't know how to control Medicare, which is obvious. We have a socialist Medicare system, and doctors always want more. There's always better machines coming out that are more expensive, more drugs that are coming out that are more expensive. The problem that governments have is like, if I had an extra dollar, would I put it in advertising to have someone live a healthier life? So let's say that $1 would have someone live 2 hours longer. But somebody then, you go, okay, why? I'll put my money into that as opposed to putting that dollar into like an emergency healthcare, you know, at a hospital, because I know that person coming in there might be overweight, might not be taking care of themselves, might be aged or whatever. I can only have that person live another like 10 minutes, where I can have, and for that dollar, I can have somebody else proactively live 2 hours. So I think we have to list everything that happens in our medical system and rate how much money we're putting into it and how much lifespan we're increasing on it. Because if you were a politician, and some mother is walking in with their baby and goes, why aren't you helping me? And you go, well, because we're taking that money to put it into advertising to have people stop smoking or drinking,
right,
and we save more people's lives like that than we do this. That's very tough for a politician to do. So you've got to have this stat in order to take care of that. Anyway, I can't see any other way of controlling this runaway medical system, and unless you're Pierre Trudeau that just puts out his printing press again and gives the provinces all they want, which is we're just at the cusp of this graying boomer population, and you're right, longevity. Something has to break.
Well, no one wants to retire later either.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
France, have you seen what the
protests, right?
From 62 to 64 in France, and all the unions go crazy, and I don't know where, you know, I mean, ultimately, you know, Europe is going to go into the hole, but I mean, what keeps Europe going is it's the best place to go on holidays. So, you know, that's their oil, right?
Right.
You know, and
yeah, that's fair. I wonder about how we're going to get through some of these changes to healthcare and pension stuff as we age. It's going to be really difficult.
Well, ultimately, you know, the people that are getting taxed so much will leave. I mean, we saw that in Britain in the 70s with the rock stars. You know, you tax people like 80-90% on, you know, a certain amount of money, they just move. And it seems like people in the NDP, they don't realize that people that have money are smart too. You know, they've been doing this for a long time. Now, do I want to leave Vancouver? Never.
Right.
You know, but if it comes to that, you know, where I will. You know? Yeah,
well, that's, and with that goes jobs and investments into the community and donations to charities. It's I think there's a lot of chips to fall if this chip leaves. So
yeah, because, you know, like, entrepreneurs are willing to risk. I think the big problem right now is we're taxing people to such an extent that and putting in too many regulations where if you were 20 years old and you wanted to open up a yoga studio, but you can't, because the facility you want has to have so much parking, even though it's a whole walking neighborhood. Whereas if you didn't do that, and you could, you know, you're a young person with like $10,000, you can get a business up and going. But no, a lot of businesses, because of the regulations and the taxes, are only set up for people that are already successful. and we're really losing a vast number of those what I call the dreamers who can who want to start and get things going.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think you're right. We've had some heavy topics. Let me end with just some light stuff about you. When's the last time you put on a tie?
Did I wear one at my son's wedding? No, 5 years, maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe. And I look back at a lot. I think that the tie kind of occurred when people were living in London and there was no heating, and you were, it's kind of like the built-in scarf type of thing, and people always had their, neck done up. And I think as people moved to North America, I think it set in the East Coast as, that the wealthy people, and if you were, white collar and you made more money, so it was kind of like the alpha male always had a tie, and the women were attracted to that, but who knows how all that went. But I think, you sit on the West Coast and you go, like, our environment is such that you can, walk to work, bike to work, go skiing in the middle of the day, go sailing in the middle of the day. I think that it's probably no more seen than Silicon Valley, where they're wealthy to a certain extent, but you can, if the surf's up, you want to go surfing. Well, to take off suit and tie and then come out of surfing and put on a suit and tie again makes no sense. Right. And it takes up too much time, and time is money. And so I think our culture on the West Coast has really moved this whole, I'd call it street technical, around the world is started here. And I think there's Vancouver and BC especially is the center for that.
Mm-hmm. What's your all-time favorite movie?
Godfather. And it is because as I am transferring I'm called a generation one, I've made my own wealth, but I'm transferring that to generation two, and the goal is to have, future generations not be tainted by too much money. You want them to have challenge, you want them to be able to create, you want them to be their own people. And there's a way of transferring power in a family, much like there is a corporation. So I really love that movie about how Don Corleone transfers power to his son. And you can kind of see the strife where the people aren't willing to kind of take that on, but how he does that is very elegant, and I think is a good lesson for many families.
Interesting. All-time favorite book?
Well, it's Catch-22. Pulitzer Prize winner, I think written in 1956. Of course, everyone knows the term Catch-22, but they don't really know where it comes from. And the genesis of the book is a bunch of 18-year-olds that are flying bombing missions over northern Italy during World War II. It's a comedy, so people have to see that. So they have a colonel that wants to make the front page of Life magazine. And so the only way to do that is to keep raising the number of missions that his pilots have to do in order to get articles written so that he can get his picture on the front of the cover. Well, ultimately, if you're supposed to go home at 20 missions, but he keeps rising it, and suddenly over a period of time it's at 70 missions, nobody's going home. So you're going to die, right? Because usually it's 50% chance you can make it through 20 missions, almost 100% chance you're not going to make it till 40 missions. So all these pilots, these 18-year-olds know that they only have like today to live or this week to live. And so they're trying to figure out how to live life to the fullest as though they're going to live only a few days. So it really came close to me because I was going, well, why should I wait till I'm laying on my deathbed at 95 or something and then figuring out how to live life, which is where most people figure out how to live life. If you only had that, then it's... So anyway, I'll just give a couple of examples. Like there's Dunbar, who's figured out that the only way to live a longer life is to be bored out of his mind. So he refuses to talk to interesting people. He checks into the hospital and stares at the ceiling, or stands in line at movie theaters, goes to the front and then goes to the back again. So, I mean, there's all these techniques for how to live a longer life. And the Catch-22 is the only way I get it flying bombing missions is to go to the mess tent or to the doctor and say, like, you gotta, I'm insane. You've got to take me out of bombing missions. But the minute you go to the doctor to get declared insane, those are only the sane people that do that. So the doctor can't take you off. It's only the insane people that are flying that won't come to the doctor to get declared insane. But he can't declare those people like insane because they have to come to him first. So the book is full of these like catch-22s that are very insightful into a life well lived.
If you're driving in your car, what's playing on your Spotify?
No music. I listen to podcasts, but mostly I'm listening to audiobooks. Either, my last thing this last couple of years is to listen to autobiographies. So I'm probably going through, 50 books a year now for sure. And, other than my goal was to do 100 for when I was 18, another 100 when 42, and now I set a goal of like 50 a year, and it's no problem.
Yeah, with the audiobooks. Do you listen to it on like 1.5 speed, or is it
1.25?
1.25? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes 1.5, depending on what it is.
Yeah, how good they are. Chip, this has been great. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been a real pleasure.
Okay. My pleasure. Lots of fun. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.